First from Daniel 7. As I was watching, thrones were raised up. The Ancient One took his seat. His clothes were white like snow. His hair was like a lamb's wool. His throne was made of flame. Its wheels were blazing fire. A river of fire flowed out from his presence. Thousands upon thousands served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood ready to serve him. The court sat in session. The scrolls were opened. As I continued to watch this night vision of mine, I suddenly saw one like a human being coming with the heavenly clouds. He came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. Rule, glory, and kingship were given to him. All peoples, nations, and languages will serve him. His rule is an everlasting one. It will never pass away. His kingship is indestructible. And then from the Gospel according to John, chapter 18, if you've heard this before, you know where it is. This is Jesus on trial before Pilate. Pilate has just had an interaction with the Jewish leadership. They bring Jesus to Pilate, and Pilate says, "Take him and judge him according to your laws." And they basically push the issue, and this is where you find Jesus, in Pilate's residence. So Pilate went back into the palace. He summoned Jesus and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or have others spoken to you about me?" Pilate responded, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your nation and its chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom doesn't originate from this world. If it did, my guards would fight so I wouldn't have been arrested by the Jewish leaders. My kingdom isn't from here." "So you are a king," Pilate said. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. I was born and came into the world for this reason, to testify to the truth. Whoever accepts the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked, "What is truth?" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I had a plan. I had a plan, meaning it's past tense. I had a plan. I don't have a plan anymore. I had a plan, and it was born from the fact that, to be just frank and honest, I have been tired. There's been a lot going on. And I don't mean tired in the church. Church has been fun, but we did this sermon series that was kind of heavy. I mean, it was heady. It was up there. You were in your head space. You were in the heart space. And then I followed that up, and we did the money sermon last week. Oh my gosh! And anytime you preach the money sermon, that's stressful or something, or at least it feels like it's supposed to be. Anyway, there's been a lot going on, and in society and culture, there's been a lot going on. So I decided about 2 weeks ago, really it was about 3 weeks ago at Bible study, when we were talking about the resurrection and theology and all these things, and I looked out, and at least half of the people that were in the Bible study had the look on their face like, none of this is registering. None of it. And I thought, we're almost too engaged. Have you felt that before? You're almost wired. You're too charged up. So I thought, you know what? It's time. We're just going to step back. We're going to take it easy. I'm going to do a nice DVD study for Advent. We're doing that. Come on Wednesday, not this Wednesday, but the following. We're just going to kind of slow it down. Slow it down. I think I even said that. It's like the slow dance portion of the evening. You've been dancing to Thriller and Billie Jean and whatever else, and now, just come on out and we're going to slow it down. So that was my plan. But then terrorists started to run roughshod in Paris, and in the same weekend in Beirut and in Baghdad, and then a whole debate broke out, a national debate, not about terrorism so much, because I feel like we've kind of debated that, and this is after ISIS had claimed responsibility for those attacks. And then there was one this past week in Mali, and Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for that. But we're all of a sudden embroiled in a national debate, not over terrorism, but over whether or not to accept refugees from Syria and Iraq. This is, and again, like the Starbucks cup debate that was not really a debate but kind of happened, I didn't realize it was going on until I got onto Facebook on Monday morning, and then people came to session on Monday night and started to debate it around the table at session, and what do you think? And then I went online and found out the governors were making statements. So there were, I don't know, I think 24 or 25 Republican governors, a handful of Democratic governors. And all of a sudden, we're having this debate. And unlike the Starbucks cup one, which kind of flames out very quickly or whatever, this one has sustained itself, at least to the weekend, but now people are kind of thinking about Thanksgiving, so they're going to shopping and that sort of thing. So it died down a little bit yesterday, but for this past week, it's been all over social media. It's been everywhere you go. You talk about it. And the conversations, I don't know about the ones you've been a part of, but have the ones that you've been a part of been as spirited as the ones I've been a part of? It's immediate. You start to have the conversation, and it goes from 0 to 200 like that. And it usually starts with not a question, but a statement. I, blah, 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 and usually it's presented as a statement of fact, we have to such and such, we have to whatever, and I love talk radio. I don't know that a lot of people do. This is one of the things I think of becoming an old man, and it's wonderful. I love it, and it also gives you good insight into what people are thinking, because it's amazing when people talk, how they usually just talk like people they listen to. So I was listening to some talk radio, and he said, he must have been looking at Facebook because I saw it the night before on Facebook, but he was talking as if he had come up with the idea. But anyway, we'll give him credit for it. He said about Syrian refugees, and it gets right to the heart of it. He said, imagine you have a bowl of 100 M&Ms. There are actually 100 in here. I counted them out. There are an equal amount of each color, just so you know. He said, imagine you had a bowl of 100 M&Ms, and I told you that one of these M&Ms was poisoned. Eat it and you'll die. But I don't tell you which is poisoned. You see, there's no way to tell just by looking at them. So if you were to pick up a handful, maybe the toxic one's still in the bowl, but maybe it's in your hand. And that, he said, is the refugee crisis in not a nutshell, in a candy-coated whatever. That we can't let any refugees in, because if we do, that one poisonous, toxic one that we can't see, that we can't whatever, could attack or whatever else. And when I say it gets to the heart of the issue, I don't mean he was right or wrong. What I mean is he's tapping into what this is really about. And it's not about refugees. It's not. And it's not about terrorism. It's not. And it's just like Starbucks cup discussion was not about Starbucks. It wasn't about coffee. It wasn't about whatever. What this is about, this discussion, is fear. And again, don't hear me as saying, see, that guy's giving into fear, therefore he's wrong, therefore, no. Everybody's afraid. Everybody. And it doesn't matter if you feel it or not. Our culture is in a state of chronic anxiety. We are a people on edge. I mean, again, just scroll down social media. You see it. One person says something, and they get jumped on, or whatever. And it's fast, and it's snappy, and it's passionate. And we're fast and snappy and passionate about issues that really, a lot of them, if you step back, they don't matter. And we know they don't matter as we're yelling about them. We're anxious. We're at this high level of anxiety and fear. And then when you add a layer of actual threat, it just blows up. And so whether or not that's a good analogy, a good metaphor, it does get at what we're talking about. We're afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. And there's a reason. A lot of people criticized us for not being as passionate about the attacks in Beirut as we were about the attacks in Paris, and I get that, absolutely, because a human being is a human being. We all bleed red, you know? But Paris scares us more because they look more like us. It's a Western nation. It feels more like us. The threat becomes real. The refugee plan has been floated out there since the middle of September. Did you know that? I didn't even know that. I had to look that up. I mean, because it feels like it was brand new last Monday, because that's when we all started to shout about it. But it wasn't. It's been around for a month and a half, at least. And we've been talking about it for a lot longer than that. But it's this now, because now we're more afraid. And so everything gets amped up and charged and infused. And so the question is not what to do about refugees, because let's be honest, I love debating it, I love talking about it, but no one, not a single one of the governors called and consulted me before they made their public statement. Not one. And when the House voted to pass whatever piece of legislation that'll eventually get vetoed anyway, if it gets that far, how many of you got the phone call asking for your input? How should I vote? Nobody. Okay. Any of you got a direct line to President Obama for whether or not to veto the bill? Fantastic. So we can all agree that we ultimately have no input into what happens with the refugees on a political level. So today we're going to talk about what we actually have input in, and that's how we talk about this stuff, and how as Christians we can be a witness in a world that is on edge and terrified, as people who are on edge and terrified. The Bible. It's amazing how it talks to this stuff. It's really wonderful. So Jesus, he's on trial. He's standing before Pilate. It's a famous episode. Again, if you were raised in the church, you know it. You've heard it 100 times over. But you might not know the dynamic that's happening as Jesus is standing before Pilate. Everyone in this episode, except one person, is scared to death. The Jewish leadership, who has handed Jesus over to Pilate, they are terrified. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of this threat that is Jesus, who says that he's a Messiah. His followers believe that he's a Messiah. In those days, a Messiah meant a military threat. The people who are in power feel that threat. They feel threatened. They're afraid of losing their power. They're afraid of losing their authority. And so what do you do with a threat if you're following the way of this world? You eliminate it, right? One conservative talk radio host that I listened to, not the guy with the M&Ms, but a different person, said, war will always be a staple in a world governed by aggressive use of force. Now, he was making the case for the aggressive use of force, but his statement is absolutely true. War is a staple in a world that's governed by aggressive use of force. So in a world governed by aggressive use of force, how do you get rid of things that you're afraid of? You just kill them. I mean, you annihilate him. You take him. So that's what the Jewish leadership is trying to do with Jesus. They're outside of Pilate's house demanding that this man be eliminated. And they're pressing Pilate, and they're using arguments that make Pilate scared. Because Pilate is a governor of a Roman province. So who does he answer to? Caesar. Caesar is not a very forgiving guy. Caesar executes people that don't do their jobs, that don't keep the peace. So he's terrified because the Jewish leadership have power and authority among a group of people that can cause a lot of headaches for Pilate. And so Pilate is hearing, eliminate this man, and I got to believe when he says to Jesus, are you king of the Jews? Pilate is thinking to himself, please say yes, please say yes, please say yes. Because if Jesus says yes, then Pilate can say, let's execute this guy. He thinks he's a king. Caesar alone is king. Let's get rid of him. Of course, Jesus doesn't. So the Jewish leadership are terrified. Pilate is terrified. And where are Jesus' disciples at this point? Yeah, they took off. They are terrified, beyond anxious, because there's the chronic anxiety of the Roman Empire being in every little aspect of your life if you're a Jewish person at this time. Chronic anxiety, and then the layer of the real threat that is your leader was just arrested. And now he's on trial. And so everything is charged and going crazy and fearful and terrified. But then there's Jesus, who stands in the middle of everything, with the Jewish leadership and the crowds outside shouting, "Crucify him!" And Pilate saying, "Where are you from? Are you the king of the Jews? Tell me, where do you come from?" And his own disciples saying nothing because they've left. And a side note, I heard for years when Jesus said, "If my kingdom were from this world, my disciples would have fought so that I wouldn't have been arrested." I always thought that he was kind of coming down on the disciples, like, bad disciples. You should have fought to keep me from being arrested. He's making a point to Caesar that his kingdom is not a violent kingdom. He's putting himself over against the Roman Empire. See, if my kingdom were like your kingdom, my disciples would have fought, but they didn't. See, it's a different kingdom. He's not ridiculing his disciples. He's lifting up what they did as proof that he and Pilate are not the same. That's just an interesting side note. So everyone is terrified, and what does Jesus do in the midst of it all? Does he back down? Does he say, "You know what, you're totally right. Let me get on that cross immediately"? No. Does he waver in his convictions or his beliefs for even a second? Absolutely not. He's clear, he's focused, he states what he believes calmly, directly. He just doesn't flip out. And when Pilate presses him, he doesn't go crazy. He just, again, calmly, firmly, with conviction, states what he's about. And Pilate's free to respond however he wants to. When the crowds shout, "Crucify him," does he just shout back, "You don't know what you're doing"? Again, just calmly, straightforward, with conviction, states what he believes and is not reactive to the situation. They're free to respond however they want to. And I'm going to say, because it's Christ the King Sunday, and it's not Pilate the King Sunday, or Jewish Leadership Sunday, or Follow the Disciples Sunday, that it's Jesus that we should emulate. It's Jesus who we should take as the one to follow in situations that are like the one he was in. And we are in a situation like the one where he is in. There are real threats. There is real fear. Even when I started talking about this, you had a physical reaction, probably, unless you were already asleep. Your blood pressure really went up. Your heart rate actually increased. Your body temperature increased. It's real. It's not fake. You're not making it up. This is real and authentic. It's happening. And it was happening to Jesus. And what did he do? He didn't waver on his beliefs, didn't waver on his convictions. He calmly stated them. Without anxiety, without fear. And those who were anxious and fearful around him were free to then do with it what they wanted to. And I want to say that Jesus' example could have changed the whole situation. And you could say to me, but they killed him, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. Jesus calmly, convicted, stated what he believed, and died anyway. True. But what did fearful Pilate go and say to the Jewish leadership after this encounter with Jesus? Check it out when you go home. It's the end of chapter 18. Pilate, fearful, wavering, wishy-washy Pilate, walks out of this conversation with Jesus, goes out to the Jewish leadership with his confidence renewed and says, I find no charge against this man. I will not crucify him. By God, Jesus, it actually worked. He calmly stated his beliefs, did not react to what Pilate was doing, was calm in an anxious situation. An anxious Pilate actually went out and calmly said to the people, I'm not going to do this. Then what happened? The Jewish leadership one-upped it, made it more anxious, more fearful. They said to him, if you don't kill this man, you are no friend of the emperor. And Pilate again went back into that fearful, anxious shell. Oh my gosh, the emperor, that's right, Caesar. I answer to Caesar. He'll kill me if I don't do this. And John said, he handed Jesus over to be crucified. You have an opportunity in an anxious, fearful, terrified, on-edge culture to be different, to be a difference maker, to not contribute to it, to show people a different way, a better way, the way of Christ, the way of your King. And if you want to know how, you have a wonderful training opportunity this Thursday. Because again, none of us are going to be consulted about the refugee crisis or how to address ISIS overseas or any of these things. But you're going to have imminent input on where to celebrate Christmas in your family or whatever. Because all of you this Thursday, put your hands in the air. Please throw that hand up if this Thursday you are celebrating Thanksgiving at the place you chose with the guest list you wrote, eating a menu of your selection, all prepared by whoever you wanted to prepare it. Great. We have about half of you. How many of the others compromised in some way? Yeah. Yeah. Now, how many of you, when you sit around that table, are going to have no interaction whatsoever all day long that will make you upset in the least? No potential at all of any argument, any tension, anything. We have a couple. Somebody's not sure in the back. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. I'll tell you what's going to happen in my world. I'm going to go to a place that's full of people that I love, that I kind of actively chose, but it's in Georgia, not New York, where my family is, and I haven't been to my family Thanksgiving in 15 years. And I would love to, and I miss it. But I'm going to my wife's family, who they're wonderful, and I love them. And so I said, yes, let's do that. And we're going, and we're going to eat food that I love, but it's not what my family ate growing up, except for the turkey and the pumpkin pie that I mandate be there on the table. And we're going to sit there and talk. And you know what? We're probably going to talk about the Syrian Refugee crisis and who knows what the heck else. And some of the people in that family are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. And there's one that is like Rush Limbaugh on performance-enhancing drugs. And you've been in these families. You might be the performance-enhancing drug Limbaugh guy or the raging liberal or whatever. But there will be some opportunity. I promise you, it is going to happen if you're interacting with human beings on Thursday. There's going to be some point in that day where you are going to have the opportunity to up the ante, where there's going to be tension. There's going to be whatever. My family always used to have the vote of the who's going to get what Christmas present. You know, we draw names and whatever. It was a nightmare every year. It was awful. Who'd you get? Oh, I don't want. And then the family politics would begin. Well, they don't want to. They're going to get me socks. I want so-and-so to have it. So you go to that. There's going to be some chance. It is going to happen. For you to stoke the fires of anxiety in your family or to try to dampen it, you're going to have a shot. And I challenge you this Thursday, this is your training ground for how to do it everywhere else. When that moment happens, and it will, you follow the example of Jesus. Does that mean that if they bring up the refugee crisis and you are 100% convicted that we need as open a border as possible, that you say, you know what, I think you're right, we should eat no M&Ms because one person could... No, it's not what Jesus did. It's not what Jesus did. He was convicted. He never wavered on what he believed. He calmly stated his convictions, and it was up to the other people to be calm and responsive or to keep being angry. And again, if you believe that we should be as closed as possible because of this very real threat or whatever, do you give that up? Nah. But you don't state it like a jerk either. Offer your convicted belief calmly, reasonably, and don't react in anger to the other person. Murray Bowen, he's a psychiatrist. He says this: when one member of a family, just one member, can calmly state their own beliefs and take action on those convictions without criticizing the beliefs of others, and without becoming involved in an emotional debate, then other families will start the same process of becoming more sure of themselves and more accepting of others. Because it is awful hard, if you're the yeller, to keep shouting down a person who will not play that way. You can short-circuit the highly charged atmosphere. You can learn how to do it in your family, and then you can do it on Facebook, where you probably shouldn't engage in these debates anyway, and other social media, and wherever else. You, as a follower of Christ the King, can follow the example of your King and show your world a different way, because the world needs it. Our anxious world needs a calm voice. You can be that voice.